Hello and welcome back. I am sorry for the long vacation. I was defending my thesis for my master's degree, and we will find out shortly if it was enough. But while we wait, I thought we would tackle this delectable problem from DoorDash, daily top merchants in Pyspark. So I actually really like this problem from DoorDash. So the problem statement reads, find the top 3 merchants for each day with the highest number of orders on that day. Who's got the most volume? In the event of a tie, multiple merchants may need to share the same spot, but each day somebody has to be in first, second, and third place, and there can be ties. And our output has to be the date in year, month, day, the name of the merchant, and their place in the daily rankings. And here we see order details and merchant details. We can probably, just off the top of our head, kind of see, okay, order details is probably going to be a bit more important. Just looking at the table, quickly looking at our data, we see everything looks pretty ship-shape. So let's go ahead and jump over into the notebook and begin to break this problem down. All right, let's go over our tried and true method of making sure we highlight the key points of our questions. So we need top 3 merchants each day, highest number of orders on that day in the event of a tie. So I'm just going to highlight tie because ties are cool, but we need at least one merchant in first, second, and third place. And then this is our formatting. I always recommend to everybody, make sure you understand exactly what the problem is asking for and do not assume you need to do anything else. So this says your output should include the date in the format year, month, day, the name of the merchant, and their place in the daily ranking. Okay, with that being said, let's take a quick look at our problem plan to understand what kind of data we need to be using. Okay, now that we have a really clear idea of what we are expected to do for this problem, let's go ahead and let's write out our problem plan. I think especially when you're solving these kind of complex problems and you know that there's going to be multiple complex steps involved, it's helpful to start at the problem plan, right? Like if you know what you're supposed to be doing, go through the data, go through the functions, but the problem plan is really here to help guide you. And I think it's probably the best ROI on time spent in learning to solve these things. So I think number 1, we're gonna convert to timestamp. That's something that's right here in our problem statement. We absolutely know we have to do it. I think then second, we can group and then count our orders by merchant. Third, I think we then rank merchant. Fourth, I think we use the ranking to get us the names, right? Because we don't want to pull, even though you're using Pyspark, and Pyspark's really optimized for a ton of data. Like DoorDash has a metric boatload of this stuff. So if we do the ranking first and then we grab the names, that should save us complexity, which should save us time, which should save us compute. So then once we have that, I think we want to filter and we want T equals 3, top 3, and then finally convert to DF. And I think this is a pretty solid problem plan. It addresses everything here we need to do. So then the next step for us will be to go through and figure out, okay, what kind of functions do we need in order to execute on this plan? All right. Okay, so now that we've sorted that out, let's go ahead and take a quick look at our data and let's figure out what columns we absolutely have to have. So we know we absolutely have to have items. We know we want the timestamp because that's our date time column. We're going to need merchant ID because that's going to correspond to ID and merchant details, and we want name. I'm actually going to box the columns we want. All right. So one of the big things we advocate for over here at Clean Code is an understanding of you're going to be given more data than you actually need. And part of the way that you can showcase your skill and ability and your, what's a good word for it? Your skill and ability and your operational considerations of business use cases is how you dialogue picking this data. So for example, if this was a real life interview with DoorDash, I would say something like, okay, so I know we have a lot of volume on this data, not a lot of columns. So let's make sure we're very strategic in selecting just what we need in an order that makes sense for us, so that when we go to push this into production or we give it to a data engineer, there doesn't need to be any downcycling to like get it back up to speed, because it's already written in such a way it can be implemented. Just a little pro tip. Okay, we've identified our problem plan. We've identified the data we specifically want to be using. So now let's go ahead and kind of try and figure out what kind of functions we're going to want to use. So we're going to want to import SQL. I mean, that's pretty stock standard for Pyspark. But then we're also going to want to import window, because we are going to make a window function. And very quickly, if you don't know what a window function is, if this is a range of dates, a window function allows you to examine these dates. Like this goes forward and allows you to examine these dates, and then information can come in and information can get passed out. It's kind of how a window function works. So it allows you to go through time, right, performing functions in a really concrete way. It's pretty nifty. I highly recommend looking it up if you're not familiar at all. It can save you a ton of time, and it's got a really good utility. So we've importing these things. We're going to want to use the function toDate. That's going to take care of that for us. We're also going to be wanting to use a group by. And if you don't know what these functions are, go look at the documentation. Like that's a really underrated way to get exposure to these languages, is if you're ever trying to solve these problems, you're like, man, I just don't know what to do. Go look at the documentation. Go look at what's even possible, right? We're going to want to use an aggregation. It's another great function that we are going to be able to do. And then what else are we going to need? We're going to need rank. We're also going to need to use a join. We're going to need to use a join. We are also going to need to use a rank, and it's going to be a dense rank. And look that up if you don't know the difference between those two. And then finally, we're going to need a toPandas. That's because Scratch wants us to make sure it's in a pandas data frame. And then finally, we're going to have a filter function. Okay, so this basically concludes like the workshopping part of this, where we break everything down, we figure out what we want. We're going to go ahead and hop back in the code editor, and I'm going to walk through the actual solution code, and then we will wrap this video up. All right, here we are with our wonderful problem set. As you can see, I've already imported the libraries, SQL functions, and the window for that window function. So let's go ahead now and create our calculated columns from our project plan. We know we need to get our date column. We want to convert this to date, just like the normal time, the year, month, day format. So we're going to go ahead and put that in there as well. And then what we also need to do is our second step, which is going to be to group everything by merchant ID and this generated date column right here, and then aggregate the count based on the timestamp, and we're going to call it orders. This is an efficient way to do that. We're then going to define our window function. So we're going to partition by date and then order by the window. Order by descending orders by date. So it's going to start with, for each date timestamp, the highest number of orders for our window. And then we need to set up our ranking. So our ordered details, we're going to use dense rank, and we're going to do the dense ranking over the window. So it's a kind of a lot of moving parts, but this is why we make the project plan, and we do all that work in the notebook to understand what's going on here. Then we're going to create a new DF where we're going to get rank, merchant ID, and date, and we're going to join that by the ID and name, such that we can generate a new DF where we get our merchant name all selected together. And then finally, we need to throw everything into a new DF, and we will be we have our new DF here where we've done all this work. Now we're going to make sure that we put it to pandas so everything works nicely. We'll go ahead and click run code, and we see that our code is working. And if we just visually look, it's looking all right. And we go ahead and we hit solution, and we see our execution time, less than a second, all green lines, and we've done it. All right. Welcome back to Clean Code. Welcome back to our summer of coding. I hope that as we prepare for this new round of interviews and internships, you get what you're looking for. If that sounds good to you, stick around. I'm sure there's some button you can push somewhere on YouTube to make sure you're in the loop here. Otherwise, I will see you next time.